You can be sitting in a quiet room with nothing around you demanding your attention and still feel completely exhausted. Your body is still, but your mind is not. One thought brings back something that happened yesterday. Another jumps ahead to tomorrow. Then a small worry appears. You try to solve it. Another thought interrupts. Soon, your mind is moving from one problem to another without ever giving you a real break. And the strange part is that nothing may actually be happening. You may look calm from the outside. You may be lying in bed, sitting at your desk, or walking through a quiet place. But inside, your mind is still arguing, planning, judging, remembering, and preparing. This is where many people lose their sense of control. They believe the answer is to control their thoughts more. So they fight the thoughts they do not like. They try to stop worrying. They tell themselves to calm down. They try to force the mind into silence, but the harder they push, the louder everything seems to become. It is like trying to make still water by hitting the surface. The more you fight it, the more movement you create. This is one of the first ideas we can learn from Taoist wisdom. Not everything inside you needs to be fixed. Not every thought needs an answer. Not every feeling needs to be pushed away. Sometimes, peace begins when the struggle ends. Silence does not mean having an empty mind. It means no longer giving every thought the power to pull you around. Think about how much of your day is spent reacting. A message appears and you react. A memory comes and you react. Someone says something you dislike and you react. A future problem enters your mind and you react as if it is already happening. Your mind becomes a place where everything gets a response. But what if it did not have to be? What if taking back control did not mean controlling more? What if it meant learning what you no longer need to fight? That question changes everything. Because before the mind can become quiet, we have to understand what keeps making it noisy in the first place. You can be sitting in a quiet room with nothing around you demanding your attention and still feel completely exhausted. Your body is still, but your mind is not. One thought brings back something that happened yesterday. Another jumps ahead to tomorrow. Then a small worry appears. You try to solve it. Another thought interrupts. Soon, your mind is moving from one problem to another without ever giving you a real break. And the strange part is that nothing may actually be happening. You may look calm from the outside. You may be lying in bed, sitting at your desk, or walking through a quiet place. But inside, your mind is still arguing, planning, judging, remembering, and preparing. This is where many people lose their sense of control. They believe the answer is to control their thoughts more. So they fight the thoughts they do not like. They try to stop worrying. They tell themselves to calm down. They try to force the mind into silence, but the harder they push, the louder everything seems to become. It is like trying to make still water by hitting the surface. The more you fight it, the more movement you create. This is one of the first ideas we can learn from Taoist wisdom. Not everything inside you needs to be fixed. Not every thought needs an answer. Not every feeling needs to be pushed away. Sometimes, peace begins when the struggle ends. Silence does not mean having an empty mind. It means no longer giving every thought the power to pull you around. Think about how much of your day is spent reacting. A message appears and you react. A memory comes and you react. Someone says something you dislike and you react. A future problem enters your mind and you react as if it is already happening. Your mind becomes a place where everything gets a response. But what if it did not have to be? What if taking back control did not mean controlling more? What if it meant learning what you no longer need to fight? That question changes everything. Because before the mind can become quiet, we have to understand what keeps making it noisy in the first place. A thought appears, and almost without noticing, you begin to fight it. Maybe it is a worry about something that has not happened yet. Maybe it is an old memory you wish you could forget. Maybe it is a thought that makes you angry, afraid, or ashamed. You want it gone. So you push it away, but then you notice that it is still there. You push harder. And now you are not only thinking the thought, you are thinking about why you are still thinking it. The mind becomes trapped in a loop. This is one of the strange things about the mind. The more you tell yourself not to think about something, the more attention you give it. The thought becomes important because you are fighting it, and what we fight, we keep close. This is why trying to control every thought can create even more noise. You are giving each thought a job. Every worry becomes a problem. Every fear becomes a warning. Every memory becomes something you must solve, but a thought is not always a message. Sometimes it is just a thought. It can appear, stay for a moment, and pass. You do not have to follow it. You do not have to argue with it. You do not even have to believe it. This is where silence begins to take a different meaning. Silence does not mean that your mind becomes empty. It means you stop treating every thought as an order. Imagine watching clouds move across the sky. You do not chase every cloud. You do not try to hold one in place. You simply notice it and let it move. Your mind can work in a similar way. A thought can be noticed without becoming an action. A feeling can be felt without becoming a decision. A worry can appear without becoming your whole world. This is close to the Taoist way of not forcing. You do not need to fight the mind into peace. Sometimes peace comes from leaving the mind alone. That small space changes everything. Instead of asking, how do I stop thinking? You begin to ask, does this thought really need me? And that question gives you something you may have been missing all along. Choice. But there is another problem. Even when you stop fighting your thoughts, you can still spend the whole day reacting to everything outside you, and that is where the deeper struggle with control begins. You can stop fighting your thoughts and still feel tired all day, because the mind does not only try to control what happens inside you, it also tries to control what happens around you. You may plan every detail. You may think about what someone will say, how they will react, whether things will work out, and what could go wrong. You call it being prepared, but sometimes it is fear wearing the mask of preparation. The mind keeps checking. Is everything okay? Did I say the right thing? What if this goes wrong? What if they change their mind? What if I lose what I worked for? The more answers you demand, the more questions appear. This is how control can become a quiet prison. It feels safe because it gives you something to do. If you keep planning, checking, fixing, and thinking, it can feel like you are protecting yourself. But life does not promise certainty. People change. Plans change. Timing changes. Things happen that you never saw coming, and no amount of thinking can make life completely predictable. This does not mean you should stop caring. It means you need to see the difference between responsibility and control. You can do your part without owning the result. You can make a good choice without knowing Exactly what will happen next. You can care about. Someone without controlling their choices. This is where Taoist wisdom becomes practical. Life is always moving. Trying to force every part of it into the shape you want creates tension. The tighter you hold, the harder it becomes to move with what is actually happening. Think of holding a rope too tightly. Your hand may become tired, not because the rope is heavy, but because you refuse to loosen your grip. Sometimes peace begins with that small release. You still act. You still choose. You still take care of what belongs to you, but you stop fighting. What does not? That is a different kind of silence. It is not silence from sound. It is silence from the endless demand that life must happen your way. And yet, this creates a harder question. If you stop trying to control everything, how do you know when to act? When should you move forward? And when is the wiser choice to stop pushing? That is where the next lesson begins. Sometimes, the hardest thing to do is nothing. You see a problem, and your mind quickly wants to fix it. You send another message. You explain yourself again. You check the plan one more time. You think of another way to make things better. It feels like progress. But sometimes, you are only adding more movement to something that needed less. We often believe that more effort means better results. If something is not working, we push harder. If we are unsure, we think more. If someone misunderstands us, we explain more. But more is not always better. Sometimes, more effort only makes a simple problem bigger. Think about a moment when you reacted too quickly. Maybe you were upset, so you said something you did not mean. Maybe you were afraid of losing something, so you tried too hard to hold on. Later, when the feeling passed, you could see that the situation did not need all that force. It needed space. This is where Taoist wisdom points toward a different kind of action. Not lazy action. Not giving up. Not sitting still while life falls apart. It is action without unnecessary force. Before you move, you pause. Inside that small pause, something important can happen. You can ask yourself, does this really need to be done? Maybe the answer is yes. Then you act. But maybe the answer is no. Maybe you are only reacting because you are afraid. Maybe you want to feel in control. Maybe your ego wants to prove something. That pause gives you a choice. Without it, impulse becomes action. With it, action can come from clarity. This is one of the hidden powers of silence. Silence creates a small space between what happens and what you do next, and in that space, you may discover that you do not need to manage everything. You do not need to fix every problem. You do not need to answer every feeling. You do not need to push every door open. Sometimes, the best action is the one that works with life instead of fighting against it. When you stop adding unnecessary force, your mind has less to carry. You become calmer. You see more clearly. And strangely, doing less can help you do what truly matters better. But there is another kind of noise we have not looked at yet. It does not come from what you do. It comes from what you feel you must say. Because sometimes the mind does not just want to act. It wants to explain, defend, correct, and prove. And learning when to stay silent may be harder than learning when to stay still. Sometimes the strongest answer is the one you do not give right away. Someone says something you dislike. You feel the urge to correct them. Your mind starts building a reply before they have even finished speaking. You want to explain yourself, defend your choice, or prove that you are right. And just like that, you stop listening. This happens so quickly that we often do not notice it. We hear words, but inside, we are already preparing for battle. We are not trying to understand the other person anymore. We are trying to protect ourselves. Sometimes we speak because we have something useful to say. But sometimes we speak because silence makes us uncomfortable. We explain too much. We answer too quickly. We fill every quiet moment. We defend things nobody asked us to defend. Why? Because being quiet can feel like losing control. We want to be understood. We want to look smart. We want people to see our side. We want to feel safe. But the more we rush to speak, the less we notice. Silence creates a small space. In that space, you can hear more than words. You can notice a change in someone's voice. You can see fear behind anger. You can notice when your own reply is coming from pride instead of truth. This is where silence becomes a kind of seeing. Taoist wisdom points toward this simple way of being. Do not rush to add yourself to everything. Let things show themselves first. You do not have to answer every thought. You do not have to correct every person. You do not have to prove your worth in every room. Sometimes you learn more by staying quiet for a few seconds, and something else begins to change. You stop needing every conversation to confirm who you think you are. That is harder than staying silent, because the deepest noise may not come from our words. It may come from the image we are always trying to protect. Who are you when you do not need to prove anything? And what happens when even that image becomes quiet? At some point, the struggle begins to change. The thoughts still come. Life still brings problems. People still act in ways you cannot control. Plans still fail. The future still refuses to give you clear answers. But now, something inside you is different. You pause. A thought appears, but you do not have to chase it. Fear appears, but you do not have to obey it. Something changes around you, but you do not need to fight it at once. You begin to see that this was never about making the mind perfectly quiet. It was about no longer being pushed around by everything that moves through it. This is where the 7 teachings come together. A thought does not need to become a battle. Uncertainty does not need to become a need for control. Action does not always need more force. Words do not always need an answer. Silence can help you see. And the image you hold of yourself does not need constant protection. Little by little, the mind has more space. And with that space comes a different kind of strength. You can act without rushing. You can speak without proving. You can listen without preparing a defense. You can face change without demanding that life stay the same. This is the deeper meaning of doing less. It is not laziness. It is not giving up. It is not walking away from life. It is learning when to stop pushing. A river does not need to fight every stone in its path. It keeps moving, finding the space that is already there. In the same way, you can remain still inside while life keeps moving outside. That is real freedom. You do not control every thought. You do not control every person. You do not control every result. You simply become less controlled by them. And maybe that is what taking back control of your mind really means. Not adding more force. Not filling every silence, but leaving enough space to notice what is already here. So ask yourself quietly, what am I still trying to force? What am I still trying to prove? And what might happen if, for once, you stopped filling the silence and simply let life move?